The galaxy had watched Earth for centuries, a tiny blue-green world nestled on the outer edge of the Milky Way, brimming with contradictions. Its inhabitants, humanity, had been both fierce and fragile, capable of breathtaking creativity, but also unspeakable violence. Yet Earth had remained on the periphery of galactic affairs, its fate largely ignored by the higher echelons of the galactic concord. They were seen as primitive, violent at best, a curiosity but not a threat. For years, Earth's radio waves broadcast nothing but static, commercial ads, and an endless stream of war documentaries. A planet steeped in conflict, but incapable of ever escaping its own self-made prison. The Concord dismissed them as inconsequential. They were just another chaotic species, doomed to repeat their history. In the grand scheme of galactic civilization, Earth was little more than a backwater, unnoticed, unimportant. Until the silence. It started subtly. Concord deep space probes, designed to monitor the progress of emerging civilizations, detected something. A fluctuation in Earth's electromagnetic spectrum. A series of strange, powerful pulses originating from an unknown source deep within the planet. Most dismissed it as nothing more than a natural anomaly, perhaps a quirk in Earth's atmosphere or some previously undiscovered natural phenomenon. But the frequency and power of the signals were unlike anything the Concord had encountered. As weeks passed, the signals grew more organized, more focused. Then, without warning, the probes went dark. Just vanished. No interference, no explanation. The first sign of true danger came from the Cyrex Dominion, a race known for their aggressive territorial expansion and brutal conquests. The Cyrex were one of the few factions who had taken an interest in Earth. They had always seen potential in humanity, not as allies, but as tools. Human labor, human ingenuity, human brutality. All could serve their empire. The Cyrex had planned to subdue Earth quietly, to seize control of their resource-rich world before the Concord could intervene. But it would be the last mistake the Cyrex ever made. A single Cyrex dreadnought, a gleaming behemoth of advanced weaponry and arrogance, descended into Earth's orbit without warning. The vessel broadcast a simple, bellicose message: surrender or face annihilation. Earth's response was swift and shocking. Within moments, the Cyrex dreadnought's advanced sensors picked up a new fleet, a fleet that had not existed a moment ago. Hundreds of ships, sleek and glowing with unfamiliar technology, appeared from the shadow of Earth's moon. They were unlike any ships in the Concord's records. The ships were not just fast. They moved with a precision, as though they had always been in place, waiting for the right moment. As the Cyrex ship attempted to communicate, its signal was suddenly cut off. The dreadnought opened fire on Earth, a barrage of energy beams aimed at the planet. The unknown fleet didn't flinch. In a heartbeat, a massive railgun fired from one of the human ships, and the Cyrex dreadnought was obliterated in a flash of light. The suddenness of the attack left the galaxy in stunned silence. The humans had done it. They had made their first move. And the galaxy had just realized that Earth was not the helpless backwater it had once been thought to be. The destruction of the Cyrex dreadnought sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. In mere moments, the once dismissed humans had demonstrated a power that shook the very foundation of the galactic Concord. The Concord's council chambers, usually a place of slow, methodical debate, now buzzed with frantic energy. News of the destruction spread across the galaxy faster than any comms network could carry it. "What happened?" asked Chancellor Arius, his voice barely a whisper as he stared at the raw data, blinking as if struggling to make sense of it. "We don't know yet," replied Telran, an expert in alien warfare. His hands trembled slightly as he studied the data. The Cyrex dreadnought was a formidable vessel, equipped with technology light years ahead of anything Earth was supposed to have access to. And yet, this is unlike anything we've encountered before. The council chamber fell into an uncomfortable silence. It wasn't just the destruction that rattled the Concord. It was the method. The Cyrex, once considered masters of weaponry, had been obliterated by a single shot. A single, seemingly ordinary human ship with no known history or identification. The human fleet, which had materialized out of nowhere, appeared to possess technology that defied everything the Concorde knew about physics. The signature left by the railgun was unlike any weapon they had ever seen. It seemed to manipulate not just energy, but the very fabric of space itself. Meanwhile, back on Earth, General Elias Ward, the enigmatic leader of the human forces, stood before a console, watching as the galactic response unfolded on the display in front of him. He was calm, stoic, the expression of a man who had already anticipated this moment long before it arrived. The red light of the impending galactic conflict reflected off his steely eyes, but there was no sign of panic, only the cool certainty of someone who had spent years preparing for the impossible. "Let them come," Ward muttered to himself, turning away from the screen and walking toward the command center. "Let them all come." As Ward spoke, a small task force of Concorde warships, led by a Higzeri battle cruiser, emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's orbit. The Higzeri were known for their ruthlessness and their arrogance. They had always been one of the Concorde's more aggressive races, quick to flaunt their power over others. Their decision to respond to Earth's actions with force seemed inevitable. "Incoming transmission," said a voice from the communications officer. The screen flickered, and an imposing Higzeri admiral appeared. He sneered as his species always did, his insectoid face twisting with disdain. "Human," the Higzeri admiral began, his voice cold and dismissive. "This is your final warning. Surrender now, or we will annihilate your world." For a moment, there was no response. The Higzeri admiral scoffed, clearly expecting a desperate plea for mercy. Instead, a quiet, calm voice came through the speaker. "We don't negotiate with threats," General Ward's voice rang out from Earth. "Your next move will be your last." The transmission ended abruptly. Ward's words were simple, yet in their delivery, they carried the weight of something far more dangerous, a warning not just to the Higzeri, but to the entire galaxy. As the Higzeri fleet advanced, a strange quiet fell over the Sol system. For the first time, the Concorde realized something. They had underestimated humanity. Just as the Higzeri ships neared Earth's atmosphere, a massive flash of light erupted from the moon. A fleet of human vessels, not just a handful but hundreds, blinked into existence, appearing like specters in the void. Each ship, different from the last, was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Sleek, perfectly engineered, and unbelievably fast. The Higzeri fleet paused. They had no time to react. One by one, human ships vanished from space, reappearing in a blinding blur. The Higzeri fleet tried to engage, firing off energy beams, but every shot missed, as though the humans could predict their every move. In an instant, a gravitic pulse ripped through the battlefield, tearing apart the Higzeri ships with devastating precision. The humans had already won. The Higzeri fleet was shattered. In the blink of an eye, their once proud ships were reduced to floating debris. The aftermath was eerily quiet as the human ships began to disappear, vanishing back into the folds of space as if they had never been there at all. Only the burning wreckage of the Higzeri battle cruiser remained as a haunting reminder of the power humanity had just unleashed. The galaxy was stunned. The Higzeri, once one of the most feared factions in the Concorde, had been obliterated in moments. How? And why had Earth, a species thought to be centuries behind, pulled off such a staggering display of power? For the first time in galactic history, the Council convened not to discuss petty matters of trade or diplomacy, but to address something far more pressing: humanity's sudden, unprecedented emergence as a galactic force. "The Higzeri have been eliminated," said Chancellor Arias, his voice heavy with disbelief. "And the humans didn't just defend themselves. They attacked." "Attack?" asked Telren, his brows furrowed. It wasn't an attack. It was a demonstration, a show of dominance. Humanity's military capabilities are beyond anything we could have imagined, said Lirith, a seasoned analyst from the Neru colony. She was pale, her hands shaking as she sifted through the intelligence reports. They didn't just use weapons we've never seen before. They anticipated every move the Ixeri made. It's as if they'd studied us, studied everything. The data pouring in from Earth's attack was incomprehensible. Weapons systems beyond known technology, ship maneuvers that defied the laws of physics, and shields that could block even the most advanced energy blasts. But what terrified the Concorde even more than the destruction was the lack of human casualties. Every system, every ship, every tactic had been designed with precision and efficiency. Humanity didn't just fight wars, they had perfected them. "What do we do now?" asked the Angie, a quiet and diplomatic species from the Epsilon sector, their tentacles twitching in nervous anxiety. "We cannot ignore this. Earth has shown they are ready to take their place among us. But how do we proceed?" No one had an answer. The galactic balance was teetering, and no one could predict how humanity would fit into it. Back on Earth, General Elias Ward stood before a large holographic display in the command center, his face a picture of calm. His eyes scanned the ongoing communications from the Concorde, which now buzzed with frantic attempts to understand what had just occurred. For a moment, Ward said nothing. He had anticipated this moment for years, even decades. Humanity's secrecy, its long-standing preparations, had all led to this point. What the galaxy didn't realize was that Earth had been forced to prepare in the darkest of circumstances, when they had no choice but to survive. Ward's fingers hovered over a command panel, and a new transmission flickered to life on the screen. It was a single, encrypted message broadcast to the entire Concorde. "This is not a declaration of war. It is a warning. Do not interfere. Do not test us. We are more than you think." The message was short, simple, but the weight of it landed like a blow. Across the galaxy, the Concorde reacted. Ambassadors, military strategists, and diplomats scrambled to discuss the implications. Some saw an opportunity to approach Earth, offering alliances, perhaps even knowledge exchange. But others, more cynical, argued that humanity could not be trusted, not when they had weapons capable of obliterating entire fleets in an instant. Meanwhile, Earth's message echoed through the galaxy, unanswered. Humanity had made it clear that it was not interested in negotiations. The power they wielded was not a tool to be bartered, not a toy to be stolen. It was a promise. The galaxy, it seemed, had no choice but to learn to live with Earth's newfound power. And the first lesson was already painfully clear. Humanity was not to be underestimated. The Concorde's response to Earth's message was not one of peace. Within hours of the transmission, warships from multiple factions began to amass at the edge of Sol's system, each more formidable than the last. The Ixeri defeat had been swift, but it was only the beginning. There was a deep-seated fear among the galaxy's powers. Humanity's power was real, and it was beyond anything they could comprehend. Chancellor Arias paced in his private quarters, a holographic map of the human solar system spread before him. The map pulsed with activity, each ship or station marked by a glowing dot. The Council had agreed to send a fleet, but not just any fleet. They would deploy their most advanced warships, led by a squadron of Xanthi dreadnoughts, massive bioengineered vessels capable of annihilating entire cities in seconds. "This will end the human question once and for all," Arias muttered under his breath, his eyes narrowing as he studied the map. But as the fleet assembled in hyperspace, the word resolve lingered in his mind. What did it mean for humanity to have resolve? To know that you could crush an enemy without hesitation. The humans had made their stance clear. They wouldn't bow. They would fight. And win. On Earth, General Elias Ward stood at the center of a massive command hub, the air buzzing with activity. He watched the comms feeds, his hands clasped tightly behind his back, his face the picture of unshakable calm. "Sir," a lieutenant approached, her voice laced with unease. "The Concord fleet is on the move. Their dreadnoughts are en route. They're coming for us." Ward's gaze never faltered from the displays. He had known this would happen. The galaxy would not accept a species that dared to challenge its established order. But humanity had no intention of folding. "Activate the phase shield," Ward ordered. The lieutenant hesitated for just a moment before responding. "Sir, that would be a first use. It's never been tested against such firepower." "I know," Ward said, his voice firm. "It's time. Prepare the fleet." The phase shield was one of Earth's most guarded secrets. Developed over decades of experimentation with captured alien technology, the shield was designed to bend the fabric of space around a fleet, rendering them completely invisible to enemy sensors. The shield was a weapon in itself, able to distort and warp reality, making it impossible for enemies to detect the ships until they were already in range. It was humanity's ultimate trump card, and Ward knew that if it worked, it would change the course of this war. Meanwhile, a meeting was taking place in the Concord Council chamber. News of Earth's technological prowess had spread like wildfire, and some of the more cautious members of the Concord were beginning to question the wisdom of attacking. They had seen what happened to the Exari. The sheer efficiency, the cold, calculating precision with which Earth had destroyed their fleet. It wasn't just technology they feared. It was humanity itself. "The humans are not like us," said Lyrith, the analyst from Niru Colony, her voice tinged with both admiration and fear. "They have a ferocity that none of us possess, a drive to survive that surpasses anything we can understand." "They are an existential threat," said Telrin, his voice blunt. "We cannot let them grow stronger." Back on Earth, Ward's face hardened as the countdown to the incoming battle began. In the quiet moments before the first shots were fired, he had one final thought. Humanity would not bend. Not to the Concord. Not to anyone. As Earth's fleet shifted into formation, the first of the Concord ships arrived, their engines gleaming with the promise of destruction. But they were met with the unexpected. A sudden, overwhelming pulse of gravity, distorting space around them, and the human ships appeared out of nowhere, hidden in plain sight, now just a hair's breadth from the enemy. Ward's voice came through the comms, steady and unyielding. "This is your only warning," he said. "Leave now, or face the consequences." The galaxy was about to learn that human resolve was not just a force of will. It was a weapon, and it was unstoppable. The battle at Earth's doorstep had been a harrowing spectacle. The Concord fleet, once confident in its overwhelming superiority, had found itself in a perilous standoff with an adversary it had grossly underestimated. The phase shield, the weapon humanity had concealed for decades, had shifted the balance of power in a single strike. The human ships had reappeared right in the midst of the fleet, rendering the Concord warships vulnerable, easy targets. The shock was not just in the weapons humanity wielded, but in the precision and foresight with which they used them. Despite the intense pressure, the Concord fleet held its ground, barely. The pulse of humanity's gravitic weapons warped space in ways the Concord couldn't have anticipated. Ships were disintegrating, but no one in the fleet was panicking yet. The Concord had survived worse. Yet, as the battle raged on, a deeper unease began to spread through the ranks of the Concord. How could Earth possess such weaponry? The galaxy had long considered humanity to be a primitive species. They were nothing more than a footnote in galactic history, a curiosity to be watched from a distance. How could they, in such a short time, have created such devastating technology? The truth, as it would soon emerge, was far darker than anyone could have guessed. Inside the Concord Intelligence Bureau, a small but elite team of analysts worked feverishly to decipher the patterns behind Earth's sudden surge in power. Something didn't add up. The galaxy had tracked humanity for centuries, and until recently, Earth had been isolated, primitive, barely able to extend beyond its own solar system. But now, Their ships were equipped with technologies that seemed alien, and some of the Concorde's top engineers had found eerily familiar elements woven into Earth's designs, elements that had never been publicly shared. What if Earth didn't just develop this technology on their own? Lirith, the analyst, whispered as she sifted through the encrypted data. Her colleagues barely noticed her voice at first. They were too busy trying to figure out how Earth could possibly have developed such highly advanced systems. But Lirith's question hung in the air, and soon it became clear. The answer was not in Earth's ingenuity alone. "What do you mean?" Tel'Ren asked, his voice tight with suspicion. "The designs we're seeing," she said, pulling up a holographic model of one of Earth's warships. "They match exactly what we encountered during the first contact with the Drothon species, over a century ago." A ripple of disbelief washed through the room. The Drothon, an aggressive and highly secretive species, had been eradicated by the Concorde after a failed attempt to invade the galaxy. Their technologies had been locked away in high-security storage, deemed too dangerous for any species to possess. Lirith continued, her eyes scanning the data. "We thought we wiped them out, but what if Earth didn't just have contact with the Drothon? What if they were part of it?" The room fell silent. The realization hit them like a wave of cold fear. Earth had not developed this technology alone. The humans had discovered it, stolen it, and adapted it. They had hidden it for years, biding their time, preparing for this moment, when the galaxy would be forced to face their growing power. "We've been blind," Tel'Ren murmured, his voice growing thin with horror. Humanity wasn't just an isolated species. They were playing a long game, a game we didn't see. But the darkest part of it all was not just the humans' stolen technology. It was what they had been doing with it. While the Concorde had assumed that Earth had remained a relatively peaceful world, it had been preparing for war in the deepest shadows of space. They had been building their strength, hidden from the eyes of the galaxy, for decades. The transmission that followed in the wake of the battle, a simple warning, had been a signal to the galaxy. But to the Concorde, it was more than that. It was a declaration of humanity's new role in the cosmos. As the Concorde scrambled to reassemble their forces, the truth was clear. Humanity was no longer just a player in the galaxy. They were a force to be reckoned with, one that had the power to upend everything. And worse, the Concorde realized too late, the humans weren't just defending their home. They were playing the long game, and the galaxy was their chessboard. The realization that humanity had not only discovered but perfected alien technologies shook the foundation of the Concorde. The implications of this revelation were far-reaching and terrifying. If the humans had access to Drothon technology, then the true nature of their power was even greater than anyone had imagined. It was no longer about a single devastating weapon. It was about an entire arsenal, hidden from the galaxy's eyes for generations, waiting for the right moment to strike. Across the galaxy, factions that had long been complacent in their superiority over Earth began to reconsider their stance. The Xyrians, a mercantile empire that prided itself on intelligence and information warfare, had always viewed humanity as an insignificant blip on the galactic map. They had traded freely with the Earth, seeing no real danger. Now, the Xyrian Council called an emergency session. "How did we let this happen?" High Chancellor Tyrus asked, his sharp features twisted in anger. "How did we not notice them growing stronger?" "We didn't look," replied Silka, the chief intelligence officer, her voice tight with regret. "We were too focused on other threats, too enamored with our trade routes and new alliances. Earth's rise went unnoticed. The humans have outplayed us," Tyrus seethed. "And now, they are unpredictable. What if they decide to seize our colonies next? What if they strike without warning?" The Xyrians were not alone in their panic. The Orcs, a formidable warrior species with a history of brutal conquest, had once seen Earth as a weakling species, ripe for exploitation. They had planned to attack Earth's colonies for resources, confident in their military superiority. Now their generals convened behind closed doors, asking the same questions. "What do we know about their plans?" asked General Kor, his massive body towering over the table. "Are they just defending their home, or do they have something else in mind?" "I've reviewed the data from their defense systems," said a tactical officer, pointing to a hologram of Earth's military network. "These ships, they're not just designed for defense. They're configured for rapid, large-scale attack." General Kor's eyes narrowed. "They're preparing for something bigger." Back on Earth, General Elias Ward was preparing his forces for what would come next. The Concorde's response was inevitable, but Ward had no illusions. He knew that humanity had reached a tipping point. The galactic powers would not tolerate a rogue force rising out of the ashes of their complacency. War was coming. But this time, humanity would not be fighting for survival. They would be fighting to reshape the galaxy in their image. Ward stood at the command center, watching the fleets that had already gathered in orbit around Earth. Over the past months, human ships had been appearing across the system, steadily building a formidable defense network. What had once been a fragmented, disjointed collection of vessels was now a cohesive, well-coordinated fleet, each ship working in tandem, synchronized by advanced AI systems that no other race in the galaxy had ever seen. He turned to his trusted officers. "Prepare the fleet. We make our stand here. We do not run. The Concorde and its allies may be many, but they are divided. We are united. We are humanity." There was a collective nod of agreement from his commanders, a bond of unshakable resolve in their eyes. Ward's message to the galaxy was clear. Earth would not be intimidated, nor would they submit to a fate dictated by the Concorde or any other power. They had fought for centuries just to survive on their homeworld. Now, they were fighting to thrive. Back in the Concorde, leaders scrambled to rally their forces. They were unified in their desire to crush this growing threat. But beneath the surface, doubts began to emerge. The humans were no longer the weak, fragile creatures the Concorde had once dismissed. They were something else entirely, a force to be reckoned with. The stage was set. A galactic conflict was on the horizon, one that would determine the future of not just Earth, but the very fabric of the galaxy itself. The tensions that had been simmering for months finally erupted. Across the galaxy, military forces began to move, their ships gliding through the void with deadly intent. The Concorde, furious over humanity's refusal to bow to their superior might, had set their sights on Earth. The fleet was vast, a coalition of the galaxy's most powerful factions, all converging for one singular purpose: to bring humanity to its knees. On Earth, the mood was grim but resolute. General Elias Ward stood in the heart of the human command center, surrounded by his top officers. The immense war room was illuminated by countless holoscreens displaying the movements of the enemy fleet, as well as the positions of Earth's own ships, strategically placed in defensive formations around the planet and the moon. Ward's gaze was steady, his mind running through hundreds of calculations, but there was no fear in his eyes. "We've trained for this moment," Ward said, his voice cutting through the buzz of the room. "The Concorde might have numbers, they might have firepower, but they don't have what we have: unity, ingenuity, and a resolve that will break their will." A heavy silence settled over the room as his officers nodded in agreement. They had no illusions. The odds were stacked against them, and the Concorde's combined fleet vastly outnumbered their own. But humanity had something far more dangerous than sheer numbers. They had adapted. They had learned from every encounter with alien species, incorporating stolen technologies, reverse engineering the secrets of their enemies, and creating a fleet unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Outside the Earth-Moon system, the Concorde's massive fleet loomed, a terrifying sight. The first wave consisted of over 300 ships, from battle cruisers to dreadnoughts, all powered by a combination of advanced weaponry and cutting-edge tactics. These ships were designed to break the back of any foe, to intimidate and annihilate in one fell swoop. But the Concorde had underestimated the humanity they were about to face. The battle began without warning. The first salvo of energy blasts from the Concorde warships lit up space like a violent storm. A cacophony of energy rippled through the void as the Concorde's warships unleashed their full arsenal. But as the massive beams of destruction shot toward Earth, they passed through empty space. The phase shield had activated. In that instant, the human ships vanished from the sensors of the enemy fleet. The Concorde ships fired blindly, but their beams hit nothing but the cold emptiness of space. The humans were everywhere and nowhere at the same time, moving with unthinkable precision. "Deploy the gravitic pulse," Ward ordered, his voice steady but commanding. Without warning, the human fleet unleashed their most devastating weapon, a wave of gravitational distortion that bent the fabric of space itself, pulling the Concorde ships off course, tearing apart their formation, and sending several of them spiraling into the void. The destruction was immediate and overwhelming, as if the very laws of physics had turned against them. The Concorde fleet faltered, their commanders scrambling to regain control, but it was too late. Humanity's counterattack had already begun. A dozen human ships, invisible in the folds of space, fired their advanced weapons with deadly accuracy, cracking through the hulls of Concorde ships and sending debris scattering in every direction. A dreadnought exploded in a brilliant flash of light, a momentary testament to humanity's unrelenting power. The Concorde forces were reeling. For the first time in millennia, they were not the ones in control. And they realized, too late, that humanity was not just defending its world. They were asserting their place in the galaxy. And they had no intention of backing down. Back in the heart of the battle, Ward stood firm, watching as the tide began to shift in humanity's favor. Every move, every shot, every strategy had been calculated in advance. The humans had not just prepared for war, they had designed it on their own terms. "They thought we were weak," Ward said quietly, watching the destruction unfold before him. "Now they know the truth." The battle was far from over. But the Concorde had learned a hard lesson. The galaxy was no longer theirs to control. Humanity had arrived. The battle had raged for hours, and the once mighty Concorde fleet was now scattered in disarray. The loss was staggering. No one had expected humanity's response to be so overwhelming, so precise. The phase shield had turned the tide, and the gravitic pulses had shattered the Concorde's coordination. Ships that had once been the pride of the galaxy now drifted helplessly, their systems offline, their hulls scared and burning. General Elias Ward stood at the command center, watching as the final remnants of the Concorde fleet tried to retreat. It was a victory, but it felt cold. The battle was won, but what came next? "Sir," one of his officers said, her voice tight with exhaustion, "the Concorde is sending a delegation. They're requesting a ceasefire. It seems their leaders want to negotiate." Ward's lips curled into a grim smile. The Concorde, whose arrogance had once defined them, were now at their mercy. They had been humbled, made to see that humanity was not just a force to be reckoned with. They were a new power in the galaxy. "Send a response," Ward said, his tone unwavering. "Tell them we'll negotiate, but on our terms." Minutes later, a holographic communication from the Concorde appeared before him. The faces of their ambassadors were tense, but their voices betrayed a flicker of uncertainty. They were no longer the powerful, untouchable beings they had once been. The loss at Earth had broken their resolve. "General Ward," said Chancellor Arias, his voice betraying a deep weariness, "we seek a ceasefire. We've lost too many ships and too many lives. Our resources are stretched thin. We request peace talks." Ward studied Arias for a long moment. This was not a plea for peace. It was a recognition that the old order was gone. The Concorde had been knocked off its pedestal, and they knew it. But they were not ready to admit that the galaxy had changed. At least not yet. "You will receive peace," Ward said, his voice firm. "But know this. We will not bow to the Concorde. We will not kneel to any force in this galaxy. Humanity will not be a servant, nor a subordinate. We are here to reshape the order. The old ways are done. Arius paused, his expression darkening, but the truth was undeniable. The Concord had no choice. The age of humanity's subjugation, their treatment as a mere footnote in galactic history, was over. Earth had won. The galaxy had been shown that humanity was no longer the weak species on the fringes. They were a force of nature. The Concord delegation fell silent, knowing that their once unassailable empire was crumbling. The strength they had relied on for millennia had been shattered by the unexpected rise of a world they had dismissed as insignificant. But the battle for Earth was more than just a military confrontation. It was a statement, a declaration that the galaxy would no longer be ruled by complacency or the old powers. "We will not beg for mercy," Ward continued, "but we are open to diplomacy. If the Concord and the other factions of the galaxy wish to coexist, they must respect humanity's place among them. We will not be your equals. We will be your partners." The ambassadors exchanged uneasy glances, but they had no choice. The galaxy was changing, and humanity had claimed its seat at the table. Across the galaxy, the reverberations of Earth's victory were felt. Alliances shifted. Old power structures cracked. No longer could the Concord and other factions dictate the fate of lesser worlds. Earth had emerged from the shadows, not just as a survivor, but as a new power, one that would no longer be ignored. General Ward turned away from the holo communication, his eyes cold but resolute. There was much to be done. Humanity's place in the galaxy had been earned, but the battle for peace, for a new order, had only just begun. But one thing was certain: humanity would never again be a footnote.